Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Gaming Mix podcast, your official podcast from Analog Stick Gaming. If you don't know me by now, my name is Jordan. To my left, as always, but there's one episode where he wasn't on my left, so go and find that one, is Jeff from Analog Stick Gaming as well, the founder of Analog Stick Gaming. And how are you today, Jeff?
I'm doing actually pretty decent. Managed to snag my winter tires, so now I'm not gonna die on the way to work or something.
Good.
So
That's very good.
I can actually park. I can actually park now because like my parking is like on a slant,
Nice.
so I have to go down the alley and like book it, and then like basically like Fast and Furious drift into my parking stall so that the momentum pushes me up. Now I can actually just park. It's great.
Nice.
Love it.
Yeah, we've had some very cold weather here recently. It doesn't snow as much where I'm living. But we've had -6 Celsius, which, from what I understand, is somewhere around kind of 21 Fahrenheit. To put that into perspective
Well,
for
I'm
you.
Celsius as well. I'm Celsius as well. So like I know, but like -6 is like I don't need to start my car early or anything like that. It's chilly, like it's a little chilly. Like I can probably get away with like a hoodie or something like that. But yeah, once it starts hitting like -10 and
Yeah.
and all that, because
And
like I
and
think it's
where
like
I live,
-16.
we're so I'm near basically the Bristol Channel, kind of. So we get a lot of wind, let's say, and the wind can
That's
make it feel
-23.
it can make it feel colder than it actually is, if that makes sense. But
Oh
yes,
yeah,
I'm.
wind chill's a wind bitch.
Luckily, it hasn't made me ill, and that's why you're getting 2 episodes in a row for once. So we're happy about
Nice.
that because we've got. Well, at time of recording, yesterday was the Xbox Developer Direct, so we'll be going over that and talking about all of those games because I was actually quite pleased with that. We'll talk about why later on. We have had some sad news as well in terms of news stories this week, so we will also get to those, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we've been playing because me and Jeff have actually managed to play a bit of a game together for once, which doesn't happen as often as we'd like it to, but we've certainly been playing
Yeah, we've got a
something
few
together.
embargoed. We got a few embargoed games that we can't talk about as well
Yes,
too.
we
So
do. Yeah,
it'll be light on like new games essentially.
yeah.
Just catching up on some stuff and but yeah.
Yeah. I do, however, before we get to the news, I want to start with one thing, which was last week I asked the question at the end of the episode to the viewers and listeners of what game would you like to hear more about this year that you don't necessarily expect to come out this year, and I said that we would answer it the following week. So, Jeff, is there a game in particular that we know exists, or you can even stretch it to a team's next project if you like? But is there a game that you'd like to hear about and see this year?
Like in terms of something that hasn't been shown.
Yes, yeah.
Uh, I mean, honestly, I would love to see kind of what Wonder Woman's going to be, just because apparently it uses the Nemesis system, so I want to see that evolve.
Nice.
I also want to see other developers being able to use it, but fuck
Yeah,
Warner Brothers.
yeah.
Um, Warner Brothers, if you want to send me code, go for it. Um, but yeah, like I think honestly seeing that because like the team that's made it is behind they're the other monolith essentially.
Yes, yeah.
I think the less talented one,
They
but
made
Warner
the
Brothers, if you
two.
want to send
They
me
made
code,
the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War game,
yes,
right? So they
yeah.
can make very good games, and I am
Oh
definitely
yeah,
interested to
excellent
see.
games.
I'm
There's
definitely
not the best
interested to see
monolith one.
what their Wonder Woman is. Because I think that could be really interesting, and the Nemesis system is a really cool system that I do wish more developers got to use. I can understand to some extent why they would want to lock that down, but obviously it's something that we don't often see in gaming, and I think that's why it's kind of frowned upon because we haven't
I'm
seen
pretty
other
sure that
companies locking down tech in that
yeah,
way.
I'm pretty sure that if a studio with enough lawyers got involved, they could make it a freely used mechanic
Yeah.
because of like, it would be like trademarking health bars. Like I
What did
honestly
you
think that if
see?
a team
That
if a
actually
team basically
reminds me of something I saw floating around on Twitter this week, which is apparently Take Two was taking Remedy to court, and it's kind of been cleared up since that that's not actually what's happening. But it's all to do with
yeah,
because Remedy redesigned their logo and it looks somewhat
an R
similar
on
to
it.
Rockstar's logo
Oh,
in
it doesn't
Take
look
Two's
anything.
yeah, in Take
It
Two's
doesn't look
mind.
anything similar. That that is that's so stupid. It's like if there was like some like oil company or whatever that like a gasoline company that was called like Monarch or something, and it had a big M above their logo or something. McDonald's would be like, "Hey,
Yeah, it's just
stop it.
like,
We're gonna
really,
think you
you
can get
think
Big
people
Macs
can't
there."
tell the difference in these things, especially when Remedies actually says Remedy at the bottom of their logo. Like, it's not just an
Yeah,
R. If it was just an R, then I could maybe understand your issue. But they literally have wording on the
yeah.
logo. It's.
It's that whole bullshit with Scrolls, where Elder Scrolls, whatever, is like, no, you can't call your game Scrolls. And then there was that other game, um, it was with that girl and that golem type of thing
I don't know.
in a frozen wasteland and stuff, and they had to change the name of the game,
I don't
and
know.
they ended up putting just a Y in it. I can't remember the name of that
Oh,
game,
I'm not sure what that one is.
but
I know that
yeah, they had to change it.
I know that the so John Garvin obviously started up a new studio, and he was making a game, and they had to rename their game that they're making because another game came out with the same name. Um, so I don't know what that one is that you're talking about, but yeah, I think it happens quite regularly. As for me, and a game that I'd like to see or hear from this year, because I think it is time. And this is just off the top of my head. I'm sure there's many more, but I do think it's time to hear something about the next Gears of War game this year. Even if it's not coming till next year, I think they should do some sort of cinematic or story type trailer because we know what the gameplay is for Gears. We don't need to. Nobody's going to be in a rush to see gameplay. But if you can do some cinematic kind of story trailer, I think that will whet
Oh,
the appetite of people.
I found the game. It was Pray for the Gods. They had to change it, and they ended up changing it to Praey for the
Oh, okay,
Gods. So
interesting.
that's what it was.
Interesting.
Yeah, because of a Bethesda trademark dispute over Prey.
Wow, okay.
So even though it was like a completely because it was Pray for the Gods, as in like
Yeah.
you were pray for the gods, not praying for the gods,
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's fine. That was the game.
Interesting. Interesting.
But yeah, Gears like did you beat Gears 5?
Did I beat Gears 5? I don't actually think I did, but I know it was left on a cliffhanger, and that's why I didn't finish it because I was told what the ending was.
It was just left on a cliffhanger. You had a choice about how the cliffhanger went down.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
when Gears 6 starts back up, there's going to be a there's going to be two different playthroughs that you can make.
Yeah, unless they just decided which one of those choices is canon, right?
You know, I don't think they would. It would completely deflate why you made the choice in 5. They are
Interesting.
definitely going to have it. There's no way
Interesting.
about it. There's literally no way that they could avoid that.
Maybe I
People
should
would the
maybe I should
backlash.
go and actually finish Gears 5 then.
Yeah, yeah, you get a choice about something, and you have to stick with it. And I ended up picking the choice that made the story more interesting, more so than the choice that I wanted to make. Because
Okay, that's a good
there's a
way of
choice
doing
that
it.
you can make that where you're like, okay, well, if I do this, it's not going to change much because it's still going to create the dynamic of what I want. but I ended up going for the choice that made the story more interesting.
That
So
makes sense. I kind of do that sometimes in like a RPG or whatever, where you can have dialogue
but
choices.
it'll make me play through the game twice.
Yeah,
Like I'll play through Gears 6 twice because of that choice.
yeah.
So
Nice, nice. Well, let's get some negativity out the way and go to the news, shall we? I think.
yeah. Um, so we've had a lot of layoffs all last year, and it started up again. Um, there's two of them that have hit me pretty hard. Um, So Piranha Bytes is on the verge of closure. Several industry sources have said, currently owned by the Embracer Group subsidiary THQ Nordic, the celebrated RPG developer has been in the business for nearly 3 decades. This comes to us from Game Rant, written by Dominic Bosniak. Um, I probably butchered that last name. Founded in 1997, the Essen, Germany-based studio is best known as the developer behind the iconic Gothic RPGs, as well as the Risen series, and they've been focused on the Elix franchise over the past decade. While Piranha Bytes games have never really truly reached mainstream popularity, in part because of their lack of polish, made them an acquired taste of sorts. They have been long touted as some of the most inventive takes on the role-playing genre. The studio may not get any more chances to add to that legacy, with German video game podcast The Pod reporting that Piranha Bytes is currently on the verge of closure, citing sources familiar with the matter. The claim was then independently verified by Munich-based outlet GameStar, which has discovered that the German government recently removed Wiki6, which is widely believed to be the code name for Elix 3, from its list of game development projects that receive public funding. For clarity, Wiki6 was rewarded $3 million in funding in 2023. GameStar sources claim that Embracer's cost-cutting efforts saw the company spend months trying to offload Piranha Bytes last year. After being unable to find a buyer for the studio, the Swedish gaming giant effectively disbanded its 30-some staff at the end of 2023. While the company itself still formally exists and Embracer continues to shop it around, all work on Wiki6 has been stopped as of early 2024. There's been no Germany's dismissal protections that prevent employers from laying off employers with no notice are plausibly the chief reason why Piranha Bytes remains operational, if only on paper. This is a issue that we had before last year, where they had to give a set amount of notice to the staff. So it's the same basic thing. The potential closure of Piranha Bytes would likely spell the end of its brand of RPGs, known for their handcrafted and incredibly reactive worlds with dark and intoxicating atmospheres, as well as meaningful choices. They're a genre that a lot of people refer to as Eurojank. It's my favorite video game genre. Um, and Yeah, like Elix 2 is a game that I don't think is incredible. I don't think it's even amazing at some point, but I had so much fun
Yeah.
playing in that game because like Eurogen games for me are like my favorite genre. Things like Technomancer, everything that Spiders makes.
I think that
Um,
from my perspective, what I love about Eurojank games is those games are where you can kind of find you can kind of you find something really inspired, and the only thing that lets it down is that level of polish, right, that we were talking about just now.
yeah, my saying for Eurojank games is these are games that are fueled by passion, not budgets.
Yeah.
And like you'll never like if you play Elix 2, you will see that passion. You will see the developer basically laying it all on the table and going, this is what we made for this amount of money.
Yes,
It's the
absolutely.
best that we can possibly do. And like Elix 1 for me was let down just because I hated the UI. Like trying to interact with all that stuff. The UI was just not great. Elix 2 improved on that greatly. Um, but like they like it's getting tough to for these publishers, especially like Embracer, to essentially kind of fuel these double A games because they are not like system sellers. They're not
Yeah.
like wildly popular games,
And
but.
Do you know what?
They serve a huge purpose.
I think that actually leads to a wider conversation about how subscription services have potentially had some sort of negative effect on a certain type of game, because double A games are not selling as well now as they used to, 5 years ago, for example.
I don't think they were even selling that well even 5 years ago. I think the goalposts have changed for a lot of games.
That's true. That's true.
Um, but I mean, like, yeah, like I don't know. It's just it sucks to see like because these games are not expensive to make compared to anything else, and their returns got to be fairly decent.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but like I kind of wish that like Focus um Entertainment would purchase Piranha Bytes because
Yeah.
it kind of feels right up their alley.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, like you're like again, Eurojank is my favorite genre. Um, and now we're gonna have like one less studio
Yeah.
um doing this. It sucks. It absolutely sucks. Um,
Yeah.
and going into um something else that kind of sucks in the same business. Brian Dinsdale at IGN writes that Lords of the Fallen publisher CI Games has laid off 10% of its workforce, with the developers behind the games reportedly affected. Speaking to GI Biz, CI Games said it made the job cuts to preserve business strength and stability, though it didn't confirm how its developers were affected directly. Sources told GI Biz that Lords of the Fallen developer Hexworks was affected by these layoffs. To preserve strength and stability, CI Games has made the tough but necessary decision to implement a targeted round of redundancies, affecting approximately 10% of employees across the company. We'd like to thank each of them for their part they played during their time with us. Further business optimizations are being made to the organization's pipelines and processes. Hexworks was created specifically to make Lords of the Fallen, because Deck 13 went on to make Atlas Fallen, um, which was fine for what it is. Like it is a good game. It is definitely worth playing. Um, but Lords of the Fallen was probably one of my favorite games to come out last year. It was so fun, and that game was made on a very a small budget.
Comparatively, yeah. Comparatively to other games in that genre, the budget of that game,
$66.2 million to develop, market, and produce.
that's
So
crazy.
that is tiny.
Yeah.
And like the development cost on that game was probably about 45
Yeah.
to
Yeah, yeah.
probably about $45 million. And you got to figure that a lot of these companies they're getting public funding. Like, we just talked about
Yeah.
Piranha Bytes getting $3 million or 3 million German bucks, for their funding, and like Canada does it as well too. I know Toronto, or I think Toronto does a lot of like funding and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Well,
So
it's
they're
like in
getting,
Poland, right? What's their names? CDPR. They get money from the government for their stuff. It's
yeah,
that's not unusual at all. That's not unusual.
yeah, and you got to figure that like they've made their money back on Lords of the Fallen, so like
Yeah.
it's definitely profitable for them.
But
But
I
it just
think that
sucks
this
to
is
see this.
this is the problem with the whole industry, right? And look, I work in the industry on that side of it as well, as Jeff knows. It's just, but all of this stuff, and this is why I haven't. There are other reasons as well, but the reason that I'm not back in full time employment in that industry right now is because I don't know if I want to be. Because when you see things like this, it's just kind of like, these companies are making money. And there was a thing recently, Ubisoft, where they were talking about Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and that it was closing in on like 3 million sales or whatever. But apparently that was a disappointment for them. And I was figuring it out based on some of the knowledge that I have. And to be fair, 3 million cells in that case does potentially mean that that game didn't make very much money, because I think that game cost more to make than people realize it did. If you base it on, for example, average, I don't know if they've actually announced the development cost themselves, but if you base it on
Well,
the average cost,
they made 180 million roughly.
yeah,
So Rabbids Mario 2 budget.
yeah, because
Um,
because I don't know if they have reported the budget, but what I figured out is that if you base it on the average cost of a game
yeah,
developer in Europe, which is where the majority of the development staff are for that game, it
yeah,
came out that over the 4 years that it was being developed, it would have cost them somewhere between 85 and $90 million just in wages, and that's before marketing and stuff. So
yeah,
so I think that by the time you then market the game and everything like that, you're talking about $100 million plus. Then they've got their deal with Nintendo, where Nintendo will take some of that revenue. So there is a case in the Ubisoft situation where they potentially didn't make much money, right? They might have only made 30 million in profit. The thing is, 30 million in profit is enough that you shouldn't be cutting staff. It's the same with this Lords of the Fallen situation. I'm pretty sure that they made a profit on that game, and yet they're cutting staff. You know, it's
yeah. I mean, like the technical issues is what kind of pulled a lot of people off from that game at the start. And I know, like, it just got a patch. I don't know what it did. Like the only issue that I had with that game at all was like some technical things. Like I showed you video of the
you did.
slowdown that I had, and it was brutal. And it wasn't just on my end. Like my co-op partner had that as well too. Um, but still, Lords of the Fallen, like that is a game that I'm going to repeatedly jump in. If someone was like, "Hey, I just bought Lords of the Fallen. Do you want to play co-op?" I'll be like, "Fuck yeah!"
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
I
I would
loved that
put it
game.
this way:
I even wanted to do the alternative ending.
if that game had less technical issues, I would go and buy it right now, because I know from what I've seen of that game that it's a very good game. I just don't
Yeah, like
know.
there's about 10 spots in the game where it's where you notice the frame rate drop, and there's about 4 spots in the game where it gets that bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, out of the 45 hours or 40 or 50 hours that I spent with the game, I probably had maybe about 6 minutes total of frame rate issues like that.
Wow, wow. That's actually quite impressive, to be fair. But
Yeah,
it's one of those things where when the technical performance can get that bad, it's kind of
yeah,
like it's a bit too much of a risk to buy a game for me.
yeah.
Um,
I still don't think it. I don't know if it would get fixed.
I
It
don't think
depends
it
on
will
what.
now, right? Based on what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it came out in October, right? So I
Yeah,
mean, that those issues would have been fixed by then. But apparently, it's just a memory leak.
yeah.
So if you
This is what I've
basically
heard.
like restart your game essentially like every like 3 hours or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
But all of this
Um,
stuff is sad. We've been talking about it for months now. It feels like this is episode 10 of this podcast, and it feels like every single episode except for our spoiler cast episode, we've spoken about
yeah,
some form of layoffs. What I did want to say before we move on to any further news is that I saw a lot of reports and analysis over this last week, um, basically suggesting that 2024 is actually going to be much worse for the business side of the industry than it has been even in 2023. Like, there's a lot of
yeah,
analysts suspecting that many companies are actually going to fully close this year. Um,
yeah. Like it sucks like seeing like the industry go that way, especially with like
Yeah.
the inclusion of AI tools becoming relevant. Valve making a stand on their store saying that if you are using AI tools, you have to publicly disclose what they do, how they work, all
Yeah.
that stuff, which
Yeah.
is very smart.
Yeah.
However, I will say that because it has that type of approval process, um, I think I think developers are just going to like push that stuff out there regardless,
Yeah.
and it's going to create a massive amount of shovelware.
Yeah.
Because like what 14,000 games were
Yeah.
released on Steam
Yeah.
last year,
What
and
I
like 90% of asset flips.
what I did want to say though is that, you know, the thing is, this there's I actually think there's a few reasons that the industry has gone this way. I think, first of all, I actually think that I can't remember which company it was, but there was a company recently that laid off about 10 or 20% of their staff, and what they cited was overinvestment over the last few years. In other words, they've basically
That
invested
was
more money than they should have.
they overhired or whatever it
Yeah,
was Discord with percent.
yeah. Um, and I think what happened is, as a result of the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, the industry exploded in a really positive way, right? Like, for the games industry, they made more
Yeah,
money
because
than
everybody
ever.
was gone.
Everyone was home. They made more money than ever. And I think what happened was, around that time, because they made more money than ever, everybody invested more than ever. And now things have sort of gone back to the normal level of money being made. Some of these companies that did overinvest during that time are getting really hurt now. Um, and then the second point I wanted to make on it is, this kind of stuff is actually why I think consolidation is a good thing. Like, we have a lot of negativity around consolidation, right?
Oh yeah,
But
I'd rather see a studio get purchased by someone than just completely dissolved.
yeah,
Like it just, especially when you have a studio that's been around for 30 fucking years.
I know. It's crazy. It's absolutely
Like
crazy,
I
and
don't know, especially like if it's a 30-person studio.
yeah,
Oh wait, no, was it? Yeah, 30-person studio at
mm,
Piranha Bytes or whatever like that. Like I don't know. I know it's not the best way, and this is going to sound cold, but I kind of wish that if you had 100 and some studios, that instead of just closing a studio, you would be like, okay, 5% you let go here, 5% you let go here, 6% you let go here, 10% you let go here.
yeah,
So you keep those studios around. Yes, you do fire people,
yeah,
but you still keep those
yeah.
studios
And
going
at
because
the
like
end
you've
of the day,
invested all that
the
money.
the reality of business, and this is any business, not just gaming, is that people are
Yeah.
always going to be let go when there's financial reasons to do so. Obviously, morally, we're always going to have that thing of, but these companies are making so much money that they don't really need to. But the point is, in business, your objective is to make as much money as possible. So you are going to trim employees where you deem necessary, right? That, but
Yeah.
I never ever want to see a studio fully close. And, you know, I remember, what was it, about 15 years ago now, when THQ closed down and kind of had to sell everything off. And it's like
Yeah.
that original incarnation of THQ was a really good company that made really good games on a regular
Yeah.
basis, and they just kind of vanished. You know, it's their IPs got split up and went. It's just like Midway Games before that is, you know, and we don't get it often in terms of big closures like that. But I don't want to see any studio closing down. And the reason that I'm an advocate for consolidation is for things like this. I understand people's concern that, oh, when a studio gets brought in, you know, the company that has purchased them can completely change who they are, and it could go really badly, and then that's a bad, terrible thing. But what's worse, a studio changing who they are and doing something different, or a studio completely closing down and all of those people losing their jobs, and potentially us completely losing certain IPs, right? Because IPs don't always get sold on to another place. Sometimes they just cease to exist. So it's I think that for as much negativity as there is, I do think that the negative stuff in the industry over the last year or so, with layoffs and with studio closures and things like that, should be making people have a slightly different perspective on consolidation within the industry, because consolidation in industries is usually only done for the health of the businesses, in the sense of when you see two businesses merging, was it Warner Brothers Discovery recently? In the
Was it like teaming up with Paramount or something?
And it's like in the entertainment industry, and it's like, why do you think they're even talking about that? It's for the health of those businesses, because they are stronger together than they are on their own. And actually, if they're all on their own, some of them might be in danger of not existing anymore. It's people need to kind of look at things the other way, and I think there's too much doom and gloom, and then we moan when there are negative things like this with studio closures. I think that something needs to happen, and in an ideal world it would just be that if a game makes money, the people don't lose their jobs, and as long as you're making money, you don't ever lay anyone off and all those kind of things. But those aren't the realities, right? It's like we've seen recently with Microsoft taking over Activision Blizzard, and it's like people there are leaving their jobs, and the reason they're leaving their jobs is because Microsoft don't need them to do those jobs anymore. Like, like they had an entire board of directors and executives and all this kind of stuff, and what have we seen happen? Even at that level of the company, it's like, we already have our executives that do this job. We don't also need to pay you to do it. And I know it's a horrible thing to say, but I just think that we all have to kind of sometimes put ourselves in the shoes of, if we were in charge of these businesses, what would we do? And I don't really think any of us would do any differently, because a lot of these decisions do make sense, and I can see it from a business perspective. But that doesn't mean that it's morally okay, or that we want to see it, right? And that's why I say I don't ever want to see a studio closure. That's why, quite frankly, and I don't mean to be kind of this blunt, but I really don't like Embracer Group. I am not a fan of Embracer Group because...
Oh, they've ruined their reputation now.
Yeah.
Like, by all means. Like, I don't think a studio will ever accept to be acquired by them in the future.
No.
I don't think that, like, if you are a developer looking for work, I don't think you are looking towards any studio that is owned by a Bracer, because there's no job security whatsoever.
And I think not only that, I think part of why they've ruined their reputation so much is because, like we spoke about before, how many of these studios could they have just said, okay, we can't really afford to keep you anymore, so we're going to sell you? They could have done that with most of these places that they've shut down. And these people then wouldn't have lost their jobs. Yes, they would have changed employer, but the likelihood is they all would have stayed employed, right? And the gaming industry is big enough that it's like, I would rather see the gaming industry function like sports, where there are trades and kind of like okay, we can't really afford to keep this company anymore. Who wants them? Do you know what I mean? I would rather see that with companies buying backwards and forth and changing ownership and trying different things than having companies completely shut down. It's like Remedy games, absolutely love them, right? But I'm telling you now, if they were ever in a situation where it's like we have to close down and it was just because they weren't willing to sell, I would be really, really sad about that. Because I would rather that they sold themselves and remained open than closed down. And I just,
Yeah.
I think that for as big as this industry is, there's never a need, really, for any of these studios to ever close down because there's always somebody that could afford to buy them and do something interesting with them. You know, it's who were the what are they called? Blanking on the name right now. The Time Splitters developers.
Radical.
Yeah, and it's just like I'm telling you right now that if Embracer had put some sort of public thing out there or even behind the scenes, if they had said, "Look, we can't afford to run this anymore. We
There
need to make some money back."
there were offers from what I remember seeing
Oh,
to
okay.
sell Free Radical.
Interesting. Interesting. Because that because that
That's why I
to
was like,
me
EA would have been, I think, perfect to take Free Radical.
because that to me like it's just and we've spoken about it before, but it's like if they close down Crystal Dynamics or IDOS or Gearbox, I think that people are really gonna start kicking off then.
Microsoft would definitely buy Crystal Dynamics. I don't think there's a doubt in the world.
Yeah,
They have been instrumental
yeah.
to them as
And they
a
know all of
publisher.
those
So
staff, right? So that wouldn't surprise me. But it's just this stuff really makes me sad. It really, really does. I'm like you said, Jeff. Like these are unique studios as well. They're functioning in a part of the industry and at a level of the industry where not many companies do function anymore. And that is a level that some of the most interesting stuff comes from, right? Because, like we spoke about earlier on, the thing about these AA games is they have a much bigger budget than indie, so they're allowed a higher level of polish. But because they're not so focused on money, because their budget isn't ballooned to 200 plus million, they can afford to take more creative risks than a standard AAA game can, right? That's where we saw something like Hellblade come from originally, right? Like Hellblade, the first game, AA game essentially, and the way that I think Ninja Theory said they look at it is they look at it as a mini AAA because they look at it as we're trying to achieve AAA production values with the
mhm.
freedom creativity wise of an indie, right? And speaking of Hellblade, we have of course had the Xbox Developer Direct very recently. So did we want to talk about that now, Jeff? I think we're through the news, aren't we? Do we have any other news?
The only other news I have, and it's a very brief one, this comes to us from Tom Ivan at VGC. Since the franchise debuted, Harmonix will bring an end to 8 years of weekly Rock Band 4 DLCs, up to
Yes.
updates next week. So, since the franchise debuted, the studio has added almost 3,000 songs to Rock Band as DLC, according to Harmonix veteran Daniel Sussman, who is now a senior product manager and parent company Epic Games. Many of you reading this own a good chunk of the content and remain committed to protecting that investment. To be very clear, you can play the songs you own within Rock Band 4 for as long as you like. While the game's last weekly DLC will arrive on January 25th, Sussman said all other live services will continue as normal, including rival sessions, online play, and everything else. Since being acquired by Epic in 2021, Harmonix has been focused on its new free-to-play music game Fortnite Festival. If you are a fan of the rhythm game category, Fortnite Festival is the place to be, and with support for Rock Band 4 instruments coming, this is not the time to hang up your guitars just yet. We deliberated long and hard about how to frame the last bit of Rock Band DLC of this era. The last 2 weeks will feature some tearjerkers that sum up our feelings about this moment. We thank you for your commitment to and passion to this wonderful game. Um, Man, I still can't believe they were making Rock Band 4 DLC.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
That's crazy,
like after
right?
playing Rock Band 4, loved it. My guitar stopped working. I ended up chucking it during the move. But yeah, no, it's interesting. Like I know a lot of people have want Microsoft to bring back Guitar Hero now that they own it.
I mean,
So I mean, who
that's
knows?
going to
Maybe.
happen. I'm pretty convinced. Like, I'd be happy to put a bet on that right now. I think Guitar Hero will come back because people love these kind of games, as Rock Band shows. Right? There's clearly, for them to still be making DLC this long after, that means there's still people buying it and engaging with the game, right? So yeah, it's, I don't know though. This one isn't sad to me. This isn't necessarily a negative piece of news, and it depends how you view it, right? I'm sure that people who are still engaging with that game would love to continue getting more DLC, but at some
Yeah.
point
See,
you have to
I don't
stop.
know who would even make it. Because Red Octane was shut down in 2010.
True, true.
I wonder who would even make it.
Interesting.
But yeah.
We'll find out one day
But
about that, I'm sure.
yeah. All right. Let's move on to the Xbox Direct. So we kind of covered some of these games last week in our
Yeah.
2024
we,
preview.
we we covered
But now
what
that
we
we've
would
had
hope to
more
see, but
information,
now we've had a lot more details, and
yeah,
one of these games actually has a very firm date now, which was a date that I believe we even might have spoken about in last week's episode. So
yeah, there was I'd have to go back and watch the episode, but I think there was a couple things that we kind of called there. So the show opened up with Avowed. So this write-up comes to us from IGN. So Obsidian's next fantasy RPG adventure kicked off the event with gameplay director Gabriel Paramo highlighting the game's combat system. The game will allow players, or Gabrielle Paramo highlighting the game's combat system. The game will allow players to switch between melee weaponry and spell casting or sharpshooting on the fly. The combat will also offer a blocking and parrying system for more strategic approaches to fighting. The segment then moved on to one of the game's side quests in an area called the Scatter Scarp. The player character speaks with a wounded soldier surrounded by the bodies of his fallen friends, who sets the hero on their quest. The quest highlights the game's voice acting and dialogue systems, as well as an example of the choices players will make during the game. The segment ended with confirmation of a fall 2024 launch window for Avowed, and more news was promised in the coming months.
yeah,
This game looked a lot better this showing than the last one,
I want to put.
considerably.
So I do want to say something on that because I think a lot of people missed that after the last showing, the gameplay trailer we had during their
Yeah.
kind of E3 ish showcase, one of the people from Obsidian made the point that that trailer was actually made by a third party company and they did something weird with the color grading. And that was why that trailer looked the way it did. And I think
Why wouldn't have that been like proofed before the event, right?
I have no
Like, why
idea.
wouldn't like the company go through?
Yeah,
Like, it
yeah.
seems weird to not be
I
like,
absolutely have no idea. But what I would say is, based on what we saw in this direct, it looked considerably better. I still don't think
oh yeah,
it's not one of the best looking games ever, and I think obviously over recent months we have seen graphics technology pushed really much further, so the bar for graphical fidelity and things like that is very different now. Um, but that kind
yeah.
of leads me
But I think
into another part of what we saw from Avowed. I like what we saw, and it's kind of what I
Yeah,
expected Avowed to be. But I do
yeah,
wonder
that's really good.
for the wider audience, I wonder whether this type of RPG just doesn't quite cut it anymore. And what I mean by that is I'm thinking of how people responded to Starfield and how the main gripe really with Starfield was a lot of these things feel dated, right? Like the way that character conversations would happen, for example. And yet, Obsidian in Avowed seem to have a similar kind of thing, where, yeah, the writing's really good and the performance that they showed in this side quest was really good as well. But the way that those conversations are actually framed is still in that kind of traditional Western RPG style that we would expect from an Obsidian or Bethesda game. Um, and I
I
just
think it's
wonder.
just companies. I think it's just companies playing to their strengths again.
I agree,
You know, like,
but I just wonder whether, from a wider perspective,
oh, for sure. I would
whether
prefer to
that's going to
see
hurt
like
this game.
person conversations
Yeah,
where there's like a bit more like because that's one thing I liked about like some games that kind of do more with their dialogue systems where they have like
yeah.
it pulls back, it's third person, whatever. There's characters
Hmm.
that have body language and things like that because like just them standing and talking is just boring.
I also what I would agree with because I watched Kind of Funny and their reaction to all of this, and one of them on the show there made the point that they wanted to see more of the actual consequences because the thing that is best about Obsidian games is always the choice and how those affect what happens in the game. And I think that even though they spoke about it here in some detail, I don't think they did a good job of showing like you can make this choice or this choice and they play out completely differently. And I understand that they'll probably show more in the summer when
Yeah,
we get the actual full date because obviously at the minute they just said full 2024 for this one. Um I know there's been some speculation, like people are saying, oh, because it didn't get an actual date, maybe it's going to be next year. And it's like, yeah, of course, anything could be delayed. I think the
I think it'll
fact,
hit September.
I think it will hit though, because I think the fact that they said full specifically and not just 2024 is quite telling. I think
Yeah,
that that seems to suggest they're fairly confident. It's giving them a window rather than because if they had come out and said right it's September and then they had to delay it till November, that would have been frustrating for people, right? Whereas saying
yeah.
full gives you that 3 to 4 month window where you can kind of put it anytime you want within there.
Yeah, I think they're probably timing to make it hit gold in July.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, but I was pretty happy with this one. Like, I would say it showed well. I do need to see more from it. I like the I like the combat in terms of the variety of what you can do in terms of having dual wielding wands or having one elemental wand and a sword, that kind of thing. I think it's really
Yeah,
good. I think what they spoke about being able to change your loadout during combat, I'm actually
yeah, that's cool.
I'm quite intrigued to see how that works because if you can do it as quickly as they're suggesting you can do it, that's actually a really, really good thing. Especially if
Yeah,
you
it gives you
can
access to almost everything at once.
especially if you can kind
Like,
of
I wonder if you can
save
pull off
different
combos.
if you can actually save different loadouts as presets. I'm assuming that's the way they would do it. Is there's probably
Yeah,
like
that's the only way that makes sense.
that yeah, to me that's what it would be. But yeah, I'm very intrigued to see more. I do think this will be a game that they show more of in their summer showcase. I actually would like to
Like,
see for me, I would like to see a whole mission run through, like
yeah,
a whole gameplay segment just to see uninterrupted gameplay of it. But I
yeah,
was pretty happy with it. Of course,
And I kind
second
of
up.
hope that that
Go on,
that
Jeff.
um I kind of hope that artwork is a live wallpaper for
Oh
the
my
dynamic
god,
background.
yes. Yeah.
And if they even did a wrap with that as well
Yeah.
too,
Yeah. If they did they
if
should
that
do
could
a
be
console wrap
neat.
because that artwork is amazing. Like
Yeah. I
it's
think it was
genuinely
Jamie
stunning.
Moran on Twitter was suggesting that they could do an Indiana Jones one where it's like the treasure
Nice.
is
Nice.
is, is the wrap.
Um
So, but
so we'll talk about indie in a minute, but obviously second up in the show we had Hellblade. Hellblade 2.
so
And
right up here,
this was the one that me and you both said we needed to get a date for, right? We both said
yeah,
ahead of time like this one needed a date, and luckily we got it. But what does the write up say, Jeff?
sure. So Hellblade 2, Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2 was next on the agenda. We saw a new and improved Senua who has made peace with her past and no longer argues with the voices she hears. The game will be set in 10th century Iceland, and Ninja Theory promised to make the game as authentic to history as possible. The segment highlighted Hellblade 2's improved combat system, which was designed to make the player feel like they barely survived the battle she's facing. The game will feature new companions who will aid Senua in her journey, and it will shift focus from just the voices in her mind to include the people around her. The audio design for the game also features during the segment, which includes a new spatial audio technology that creates binaural sounds and music. The team has also highlighted a partnership with Scandinavian folk band Heilung, who performed the song from the game at the Game Awards last month. The segment ended with the confirmation of a May 21st launch date. So it's my dyslexic birthday. Um,
Your
yeah, like
dyslexic birthday.
they pretty much. Yeah, if they released it on May 12th, I'd be like, hey, give me a solid. Um, but yeah, no, like this is a hugely anticipated game for me. Hellblade is in my top 10 for like my favorite games of all time. Um, like the binaural audio is one of its most impressive tricks in
Yeah.
regards to like kind
And
of
they're
how it
pushing that
works.
even further in this sequel, which I love
Yeah,
because that
I kind of wish that they would release this early, with it coming out in May, is just release a small little like sample demo to kind of get an
yeah.
idea of
I
that kind of stuff
agree.
would be cool.
I agree. The reason I think they won't is actually something I very much like, and that is they confirmed in this showing that they're sticking to the same sort of scope for the game as the first one. So it's about 7 to
Around
eight
8 hours.
hours
Yeah.
from what we know. It's gonna retail at $50 US. Um, there is
And
some
digital only.
controversy because obviously it's digital only. It's the first digital only release from Microsoft first party, but I, and don't get me wrong, I do understand the controversy over that because some people still have a preference for physical. Some people don't
I
have internet that's good
guarantee
enough.
it's gonna get a physical release later on.
Oh, you think so? Interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, like in the same way that I'm still convinced that Alan Wake is gonna get one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Baldur's Gate took a while, and they eventually did one.
yeah. Although, what I would say is, I do think that unfortunately people need to, at this point, kind of, and I don't want to sound too negative on it because I do understand people's preferences and stuff, but we are
Yeah.
heading towards a time where all games will only be digital. Like physical is
Well,
dying.
like what kind of percentage across the industry do you think is physical?
It's over 80%. I know that. No, sorry, digital. It's over 80%.
Yeah. Like I would be shocked if 8%, if it was more than 8% physical
Yeah. So I think in some
across the entire
regions you're
industry.
correct. So I actually, and I have seen this before. So I think that in the US, not last year but the year before, it was 90% digital. So it was 90 to 10 split. In Japan,
I'm not talking sales. I'm talking like produced games.
oh, okay, interesting.
And like I'm talking about like because like Our World, for example, I don't think we'll ever get a physical release.
No,
I think
well,
it'll be
yeah, yeah,
digital. You know,
yeah.
so like in terms
So,
of like
so what you're saying
availability,
is
I think honestly,
how many games are only digital that release
yeah,
generally, right? That's what you're saying.
I would say it would be 90. I would say I'm guessing 92% of the industry is
Interesting.
digital only.
And you're probably right in the sense of look at PC, right? How many games only release on PC, and every game on PC now is digital. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think you can buy a physical PC version unless it's a collector's edition.
Yeah, yeah. So straight away that pushes that percentage of, if you look at all games released every year, the vast
Yeah.
majority are on PC, and there are actually thousands of PC only games every year.
And it's similar on Switch too,
Yeah,
because like the eShop like they like making the cartridge is
yeah,
super expensive.
yeah. And that's why, and that's why, look, I'm not trying to put down people's preferences, and I understand that to some degree there will be a need for physical for quite some time yet, because certain countries don't have good enough internet and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I do think there comes a point, and I've been speaking about this recently in regards to other things in gaming as well. But generally, I just think most gamers, the issue is they don't like change. But at some point, you have to just kind of accept change for what it is and move on. Like, games are going to be fully digital. There are advantages to that, whether you like physical or not. I don't think anyone would sit here and deny that there are advantages to being digital. You know, I saw John Lineman recently, and he's from Digital Foundry, and he is a big kind of advocate for physical media and you know, kind of securing that and making sure it continues to exist so that you don't lose access to things, right? But one of the things he did actually say, because he was having a bit of a debate, um, he was having a bit of a debate around game preservation on Twitter with someone because of this Hellblade 2 conversation. And the thing that this person pointed out to him was, well, Microsoft release everything on PC, and everything on PC is digital anyway. So even though we say that Microsoft and Xbox is actually really bad for preservation, one of the best places for preservation of video games is PC. And Microsoft, because they're releasing everything there, even if they are going digital only, their games are probably going to be preserved a lot longer than any other platform in some ways because of that, right? Because of their support for PC.
Yeah.
And his response was, "Oh, that's actually a very good point that I hadn't considered before." And I think that that's the thing, is like, people accepted digital on PC years ago without really any issue, right? And I know that things like DRM are a problem on consoles, and they will always be a problem, but it's just really interesting to see that difference in mindset between PC and consoles. And I think that as we move to a place in the industry where all games are eventually going to release on PC, outside of Nintendo, because Nintendo do their own thing and they will always continue to do their own thing.
I mean, they released on PC, and Nintendo just has nothing to do with that.
Yeah, yeah. but so in terms of official releases though, I do think we're very much getting to the point where within the next 5 years, I think you'll see Sony doing day one PC for all of their games because I think that's just the way they're heading. I think it's the way the industry's heading. I think there's too much money to be made on PC these days.
Well, when you're spending $300 million on a game,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
you got to recoup those losses. But
And
jumping back,
what I was
sure, go
where
ahead.
I was going to end that point was, as all of those games go onto PC, they're going to be preserved on PC forever. So let's not really worry about game preservation, I don't think, and let's just enjoy video games. And there are more video games to enjoy. Talking of one that is a PC game.
Well, hold on. We haven't really talked about Hellblade. We jumped right into the digital stuff.
True.
Um, so like yeah, like Hellblade 2 has talked. They've talked about revamping the combat as well too, changing it kind of up, to kind of make battles seem a bit more cutthroat.
Yes.
Combat seems really good. There's a lot of really nice,
Mhm.
animations and stuff that kind of take place.
They've
Like
made it
she
brutal
throws
as well.
someone off.
They've made it
Yeah,
really
like she
brutal.
throws somebody like off of her, and then she kind of like wipes at her face with like the blood that kind of splattered on her. So like, there's some really nice stuff. Like
What
that game looks
um
visually stunning.
what I really like about the combat, because it's weird, because I do believe them when they say it's different and that it feels significantly different from the first game.
Yeah,
But there are things about it where it's like, they're still, I think they're not doing what some people wanted them to do, right? Which is, I think that some people, when they think about Hellblade, essentially want a God of War style combat where it's video gamey and you're switching weapons and you're doing different things. And I think in reality, what they're doing with Hellblade, and they talk about it in the show, where every single aspect of this game is in service of the story, because the story is the focus for them. And what I love about what they're doing with the combat here is they're making it visceral, they're making it brutal, and they're making it cinematic. So yes, it's going to feel more simplistic than something like God of War, where you have four different weapons or whatever, and you have all these different
yeah,
abilities. That's not going to be what Hellblade 2's combat is. But it's going to be a cinematic storytelling style of combat. And they actually talk about how can they use combat to tell different stories in the process of the combat encounters. To me, that's interesting because it just makes it
yeah,
so much more of an immersive, you know, to me, immersion is probably the most important aspect of a video game, because once your immersion is broken and you're taken out of the game, it's completely less interesting. So the more immersive a game can be, I'm all in for it. And I can't wait to play this game. Like, I think we all know, and I don't think anybody, realistically, there's nobody who's been paying attention to video games that wouldn't look at Hellblade 2 and go, yeah, this is one of the best looking games I've ever seen. Like, I don't think
yeah.
that's
It's gorgeous.
disputable, right? I don't. Um,
I'm interested to see how the story kind of plays out with Senua interacting with her allies.
yeah.
Just because like the first game, Senua was pretty much by herself for the entire journey.
Yes. Yeah. And
So
I
seeing her
do like
interact with
as
people will be
well,
interested.
I like that part where they talk about they're going to try and make it as close to history as possible with this kind of supernatural element on top of it,
Yeah.
right? So they're still telling the story they want to tell, and they're still making it video gamey, but they're basing it within real history. And
Yeah.
that's cool.
I'm interested to see like Melina Jurgens like kind of elevate her her craft because like when she did the first Hellblade, she was like their one of their video producers. Like she would put together like the video docs and all that kind of stuff. So she was not an actress whatsoever,
Yeah.
and she was the stand-in for like what Senua was going to essentially look like to a certain point before they ended up hiring an actress or anything.
Yeah,
So she was kind of put in that role temporarily, and then not only did she end up taking on the role permanently from it, she ended up winning like best
yeah,
female performance at the Game Awards on her first fucking game.
rightfully
So
so
the
as well.
oh, it was an amazing performance. Like I cheered when she won. So to see her kind of like back and kind of like embracing Senua with a bit more experience,
Yeah,
I'm
and
super excited.
the director of the performance capture said, you know, that Melina knows, she knows that character better than anybody else, and her instincts for how to act as that character are just spot
Yeah,
on. Um, I did also, there was, because I want to talk about the presentation of this show a little bit as well, and I loved how they put developers, as they did last time, but they put the developers front and center, and they allowed their passion to show through. And
yeah.
one part I really loved was when I forget the guy's name, so apologies, but he is the audio guy, and he was talking about the music and everything. And there was one part where he was talking about, he said it might be a little bit corny, but we are all Senua. I am Senua. Every ninja here, which is what they call the workers at Ninja Theory, he was like, we are all Senua because we all play a part in making that character who she is. And I just loved that because it's like, what a level of pride to feel like such an attachment to
Trying to think
something
if
you
it
have
was
created.
trying to think it was David Garcia. I can't remember. Hellblade II.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But he
He's the audio guy. He's the one that was talking about the music and the binaural audio. Um, and it was really interesting what he was saying. But he, like, his, you could see his passion, not only for the audio but for everything in the game. The way that he was talking about it, I thought was
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh, for sure. Like Ninja Theory to me, like they are, I think to me, they're Microsoft's Insomniac, where
I agree.
essentially they're a very polished team in terms of like what their craft is, how they know how to go about it. Because I mean, like the original Hellblade was made with 14 people,
Yeah, yeah,
which
yeah.
is massive
And this one,
because they had other teams.
and this one is, you know, more than 5 times that, I believe. It's they've grown
Yeah, because they
exponentially.
also had Project Mara or whatever that is that's coming out, and who knows what that is. Um, but yeah, like to wrap up Hellblade 2, like it's coming out in May,
Yeah.
which is absolutely fantastic. We're going to be able to play it in about just 4 months now.
Yes.
But yeah, like it just looks incredible. I
Yeah.
can't wait to see kind of where they go with the story. The binaural audio
And
stuff for
and
me
that
is
brings me to one thing, because
fantastic.
you mentioned the story there, and I did see a little bit of criticism that they haven't kind of shown more of the story, and they haven't really, like, outside of showing us some walking around and a bit of combat and that kind of stuff, they haven't actually shown us much of the game. But I saw somebody, and I think they're right on the money. Someone on Twitter basically made the point that they think it's because there's something big that happens near the start of the game, which is where they would usually show you parts of the game that they don't want to spoil, right? Because with this being such a story driven game, and with it
Yeah.
only being 7 to 8 hours, it's kind of like, if you show gameplay that is all from the first hour of the game, let's say, you're showing a good chunk of the game. So, and I think that that's why they've kind of almost avoided showing certain things. And I know that some people have the skepticism of like, yeah, but they haven't even really shown combat properly and all this kind of stuff. And I think it's because they want it to be an experience when you play it. They want you to be surprised. They want you to have those wow moments. You know, like even some of these vistas they were showing where Senua's just walking along a path and it looks like one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. Is I think they want players to be wowed and they want people to discover this game for themselves. And yeah, where I'd like to wrap up with this one, because it has an official release date, I'd like to ask you, Jeff, what do you think the critic average on this one is going to be based on what we've seen so far?
Um, I think that I think Metacritic will probably hit probably about an 83
Interesting.
because
Interesting.
there were a lot of people that a lot of outlets that were not terribly hot on the first one. Um,
Do you not? I'm going to ask you a question then, just to play devil's advocate slightly. Do you not think that the improvements to like the presentation in the first one was very good, but do you think
yeah,
having that next level of presentation would potentially push it up a bit for some people?
no, I mean to a certain extent, but I think presentation's only like one part of like a six, you know, uh, 6 part type of process and
Absolutely.
stuff. Because like
Absolutely.
maybe the story doesn't satisfy, maybe the gameplay lacks the depth that they're kind of claiming.
And
Like
and
there's
as
tons of
we
little
always
things.
discuss, right? Every single player and every single person values different aspects of a game to a different level. Um,
Yeah,
but that's what I love about this entire developer direct is each one of these games that was shown was something completely different for someone completely different, and you know, we've only spoken about two of them so far, but I'll tell you what, I think they both showed very well. And another game that showed well that I know, Jeff, you didn't pay quite as much attention to was
or are we skipping over the third game that was talked about?
what are the one that you is that not the one you didn't pay attention to? Is was that not the third?
No, the third game was Visions of Mana.
Oh yes, of course it was. Of course it was. The
So we'll blast through this one fairly quickly. Um, so the presentation broke from the scheduled announcement for a surprise segment with Square Enix,
yes.
which presented a new look at the upcoming RPG Visions of Mana, the first Mana title to ever release on the on an Xbox console. The game is the first title in the Mana franchise in 15 years, as it will feature multiple returning monsters and creatures from the franchise's past. Because previous Mana games that have been released in the last couple of years have been like remakes and collections and stuff. So this is the first like new title. It will also aim to introduce new companions like a massive canine-like creature called a Picule, which will the player can use to travel across the game's world. The segment then focused on the game's soundtrack, which will feature over 100 tracks across the adventure. A special focus was played on the music dynamics nature, as it can shift between normal and battle music instantly. And finally, the first look at Vision Amana's combat was shown, and with a mix of ground and aerial combat in real-time battles. It's scheduled for a summer 2024 release. Now, they haven't said anything about Game Pass or anything like that, but I think Microsoft getting Visions of Mana,
What I will
I
say,
think that
I'll make a prediction
getting it
right
in,
now. I'll make a prediction. I think that this game shows up again in Microsoft's not E3 showcase, and I think there you get the official release date, and I think they say it's day one Game Pass. Um,
yeah, like I think them getting Visions of Mana, I think that they've agreed into some type of like contract that Sony usually does,
yeah,
saying like, why they have like state
and
of plays that
and
feel
what
like
I
contractual
and what
obligations.
I also like about this is one of the biggest criticisms of Xbox over the years has been not enough Japanese games, a lack of a relationship with Square that they've clearly improved over the last year or so. You know, we uh Final Fantasy 14 is coming soon to the Xbox. We've got Visions of Mana, which is the first Mana game ever to come to the Xbox, is coming this year. You know, there's been rumblings around from Jez Corden that potentially Final Fantasy VII Remake is finally making its way to Xbox as well. Like,
Yeah.
they're doing the good stuff, and what I did love, because again, I want to talk about this show and the way it was presented and everything. What I loved is the way they presented this, like, oh, a guest has entered the chat, and then it comes up and it says Square Enix. That was really cool. And then what I love most of all was they treated Square and they presented Square on equal footing as to how they presented their first party games, right? As in, it was very well produced. It was like, I liked that it wasn't, because sometimes in state of plays and things like that, they'll have like a translator, so they won't have subtitles, they'll just have a translator speaking for you. And they let these people just speak in their language with subtitles for us. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, the producer had some English,
Yeah.
you know, but yeah, like you had like the creator of Legend of Mana, like there, like talking about like reading like the characters and stuff
I
like that,
actually
which is
think this
neat.
game
Like,
looked really good. I've never played a Mana game before, and I thought this game looked really
they're
good.
yeah, like they're super good. Like the remakes have been great, even though like Trials of Mana, like that game's like the storyline's old and whatnot, but that storyline's been kind of like used over and over and over again. But no, it's like yeah, like they're super fun games because they started off as a spin-off to Final Fantasy.
Yes, yeah. I did, because they actually mentioned that, right? They mentioned that it
Yeah.
started as Final Fantasy Adventure, I believe it was called, in 1991. And then it became its own franchise. And I do think, for some people, when this game showed up in this show, I think a lot of people thought, why the hell is this here? It doesn't really make sense. It's not an Xbox first party thing. And it's like, but these dev directs don't have to just be for first party, but also
They're
getting,
contractual obligations.
and not just that, but I think that people who aren't into these games maybe don't realize that the Mana franchise is actually huge, and
Yeah.
getting one of these games for the first time ever on your platform, that is a big thing. That's a big
It is.
thing that
It is
should
it,
be
it like it
celebrated.
totally is. But like these things showing up in these things, like they are contractual obligations as part of the deals of getting these games.
Yeah.
Like regardless of the fanfare and
Well,
the excitement
yeah.
around it,
And
that's
it's like
why they show up here.
you know, and it's like, it's no different than when that metaphor game from Atlas showed up at the Xbox thing. I get that the previous expectation was that Dev Direct was Xbox's thing just for their own studios. But I think realistically, we haven't really had expectations for Dev Direct yet, because this is the second one, technically third one if you include the Starfield thing, because I think that was a Dev Direct as well. It's just that they had that for one specific game. But if you look at the way it was
Yeah.
produced, it was still in the style of a developer direct, and therefore, you know,
I think we'll get one for Avowed, like
possibly,
just for Avowed.
possibly. What I would say, because I've seen a few people, before we move on to the last couple of games in this show, I've seen a few people talking about, these are so good, I'd like more. Like, let's have a few more in the year, kind of thing.
Lisa, give me some more.
And I'm actually against that. And the reason I'm against it is, I think the reason, and I could be wrong, this is just me, using my brain. I think that the reason we only get one of these, maybe two a year, is because if you look at how highly produced they are compared to the likes of a State of Play and even a Nintendo Direct, they have such a high production value that it's kind of like they probably spend months. So this January show has probably taken them months to organize and film and make. Like, this isn't something they made over the course of a couple of weeks.
I don't know, Jordan. They didn't reshoot that scene where that guy went and grabbed a pop out of the fridge when they were
That
recording.
that I loved though, because that was so intentional. Like,
He's like, oh, I did. Yeah, that was
and
good.
then we
Like,
started in Dad's basement. I love that.
yeah, like that part was just hilarious.
Yeah,
But, yeah,
yeah, and that was of
no, like
course Oxide
Trials of
Games.
Mana looks Trials of Mana looks fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, going into Oxide Games, we have Aura History Untold. So the next game featured was Aura History Untold, which is Oxide Games' take on the grand strategy genre.
Mhm.
The game will take real-world history and culture into account, and it will focus on those different perspectives throughout a match. Each turn in Aura History Untold will be played in real time, which means that players won't have to wait for other players to complete their actions in order to continue their own progress. The game features the Living World, an alternative version of Earth which is affected by the decisions of the player in real time. As players expand their empires, the world will either thrive or wither depending on how progress is made. Part of that world includes dangerous wildlife, with cougars amongst the deadliest players can encounter. Aura History Untold is scheduled to launch in fall 2024. So I saw bits and pieces. Like the only type of game like this that I've ever played was, I think, Civilization Revolution on Xbox 360. It had like a bluish kind of cover. Um, that's the only one of those games I've ever played. Like I've never played Civilization or anything like that. They just
Okay.
really my thing.
Interesting. I'm a bit more into these kind of games. I've never actually played a Civ game, but I do like things, and obviously they're slightly different. But I like your Age of Empires style game, which is somewhat different. Um,
Yeah, those
however,
are RTSs though. They're
yeah,
not like civilization simulators
no,
in that
precisely,
sense. Like,
precisely. This is
yeah.
more. This is more along the yeah. However, having said that, I've always wanted to play a Civ game, and this looks like a very good version of a Civ game where they're kind of, and let's be real, these guys, a lot of these guys are the guys behind Civ 5, right? So they've actually made a Civ game themselves. I do, I'm intrigued to see how well this game does, because that strategy is like that strategy style 4X game is something we'd consider niche in this day and age. But let's remember, this genre of game was actually huge like years ago, and I don't think it ever got any smaller necessarily. I think it's just that there are more genres now. um so I think this is a good one, and as far as I can tell, it's a second party game, right? Because I don't think, unless I'm mistaken, I don't think Microsoft own Oxide Games. Um, and
Yeah.
and it is being published by Microsoft slash Xbox. Interestingly, it's only coming to PC this fall. We know that it is coming to console at some point because they have spoken about that already. But I think they're going to do the same thing that they did with Age of Empires 4, where they'll bring it to PC first, they'll get the feedback on the game and things that kind of need to be improved or don't, and then they will adapt that gameplay and things like that to work best on a controller. Um, I think that, Microsoft have people that can help them to do that as well, because they've already done it now with the likes of Age of Empires 2 and Age 4, which both play very, very well on a controller. So I think that this is a nice little game. Like, I have no problem with this one personally. It's not for everybody, but I think for the people it is for, it looks like a very strong offering.
So the last game they showed off, I was trying to find the voice actor I was going to mention, but I can't seem to find his name. So the final segment of the developer direct was the first ever gameplay trailer for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, the new Indiana adventure from Wolfenstein developer Machine Games. This includes a first look at Indiana Jones himself, who has been designed to look like Harrison Ford, the actor who has portrayed the character in every Indiana Jones film. The game is set between Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, and it will see Dr. Jones travel to the Vatican, the pyramids of Egypt, and more. The trailer starts with the agile archaeologist in a precarious position as he is buried up to his neck in sand surrounded by enemy Nazis. We then see first-person shooting, puzzle solving, and exploration, though the game does pull back to a third-person view for cutscenes and environmental traversal. The game will offer multiple optional puzzles in each environment, and it will reward players who attempt to discover their secrets. This presentation also includes Gina, an investigative reporter who would join Indy on his new adventure, as well as the new villain in Emmerich Voss. We also see Dr. Jones fighting enemies with machine guns, torches, and the iconic whip as he battles enemies throughout the segment. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle will launch later this year.
Yeah.
So I was trying to find the other actor who has voiced a lot of um, like Harrison Ford stuff. He's also, oh yeah, he was. I'll find this while you talk about it.
So
But
Troy
we ended
Baker's
up
doing
seeing,
the
yes. So Troy Baker is going to be voicing Indiana Jones. I think his subtle conversation is very good. I think he's got that grit to that voice.
yeah.
There's a little bit of the lower tone when it's like, you have no idea how much that is, like at the
Yeah.
very end of that trailer and stuff. That kind of nails it. It's a little
It's
off,
not
but
quite there, but yeah.
I want to see more consistent stuff.
Yeah. I agree. I
So,
agree.
yeah.
What I will say, I'll be really honest. I was blown away by this game. And look, part of that is expectation in the sense of I had medium expectations for this game because we didn't know for sure whether it was going to be first or third person going into it. I suspected
Yeah.
first person, but I wanted third person in my mind and in my heart. However, after seeing it, I actually think that this was absolutely the right decision because
Yeah, I think the whip works better in first person because like again, like it doesn't just feel like, because like how would you do that? Would it just be like a targeting system
yeah,
then?
yeah, yeah,
No, and then how do you like whip the legs right? How do you like
I
like
agree.
there's so many
And what
things
I
on there.
and what I like is they're trying and they discuss it themselves. They want you to feel like you are indie. You're not playing a game as indie. They want you to be indie. Um,
Yeah.
and that
And
I
it
really
plays to
like.
the studio's strengths as well too, because like, you know, like I'd I'd have to double check. Let me double check this here.
They
Um,
made the Chronicles of Riddick game back in the day.
yeah, because they used to be Starbreeze,
Yeah,
which we were just trying to verify, and that handled it the exact same way, where when you were climbing or doing stuff, you saw Vin
yeah.
Diesel.
And
So like
that was also a
this is
very highly regarded game. That's considered one of the best.
honestly like I'm 100% wrong, but I think that was one of the biggest surprises in gaming history was that like a Chronicles of Riddick game was good,
Yeah,
like a Vin Diesel game was good, like
yeah.
for
And
sure.
also, let's
But
just be
yeah,
real. Let's just be real as well. Machine Games has spent the last 10 years letting you kill people and beat people up that you want to kill and beat up. And Indie just continues that, right? So, yeah, I'm really, really happy with what I saw from this. I can't wait to see
yeah,
more.
the voice actor that I was talking about is he did the Han Solo voice in the Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. It's AJ Lo Cascio. His Harrison Ford is impeccable.
Interesting. Okay.
So I think this putting Troy Baker in the role is about getting a name,
Probably.
and
Probably.
maybe the emotional tones that need to be, because I think if you get a
Yeah,
sound alike, I think maybe they don't quite hit the same emotional tones.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Because
and like Troy Baker is,
they're clearly trying to tell a very cinematic story here, and that's why
yeah.
they've even made the cutscenes third person as well, which is something they didn't
Oh, you would
have to
have to.
do.
Yeah, you would have to show Indiana Jones. Like
Yeah,
otherwise, it would just be another one of these like Bethesda talking
yeah,
to a face type of things and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
But no, like the game looks good. I've seen people criticize its graphics, saying it looks like a PS3 game, and I'm like, what PS3 game fucking looks
yeah.
like this? Shut the hell.
What?
Someone
Like,
paused the screen. They're like, he has toe thumbs when he's like holding the gun and stuff like that. I'm like, push your thumb really hard against a solid surface, and
yeah.
it's going to like squish up. Like these people are
And
so stupid.
also, the other thing is, let's be real. The graphics will improve most likely between what we saw and release because
Oh yeah, because that build was probably 3 months old.
yeah, or possibly even more than that. We have no idea. What I will say, what I found interesting about this one was they said later in 2024, but they also said we look forward to giving you more details soon. I actually have a weird feeling that even though they haven't given a window, I have a feeling this game could be out before Avowed. And that is based on a few things. One, I wonder whether they might want to try and do the traditional Bethesda thing, which Machine Games has kind of done themselves as well, where they have like a first showing of a game, or they have one big reveal, and then a few months later the game is out. Like even if you look at Machine Games, generally speaking, they've revealed their games, and within 3 or 4 months they're out. Right? I'm not saying this is going to be out within 3 or 4 months, but I do
I think it's November
think that's interesting. That's interesting that you think it's November. I
because like they did say later 2024. Like
what
they kind of
Well,
use
they
that
said, yeah,
phrasing.
they said later in the year, right? But the thing about
Yeah.
later in the year is later in the year, realistically, could be any time after today.
Yeah, but I said like, we're eager to release this game soon or something like that. But when you say later,
Yeah,
that immediately makes you think at the tail end of
I
something.
agree. But what I wonder, and I could be wrong, but I just wonder whether this could be a summer game, whether this could be like a July or August release.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
trying to
realistically it hits November, but I think July would be suitable.
yeah, yeah. I was really happy with, like, I could speak about this game for
Yeah, it looks
ages
good.
though. I was really happy with it,
Yeah,
and
it looks really,
I
really good.
and then the other guy is in it as well. Played Venom recently in Spider-Man 2. I forget his name.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Tony Todd. Yeah, he plays the
He
guy that breaks into
yeah.
the museum and stuff like that.
What I really did like about the look of the gameplay is the different ways in which you can use the whip. So like obviously you can use the whip for traversal, you can use it for distractions and kind of stealthing your way through different sections. Um and then you could use it in combat as well, right? And it looked like you could use it to actually damage people. It looked like at one point he even maybe deflected a bullet with it, which was a bit weird, but video games and all that, so why not?
I wonder
Um,
if I have to James John Rice Davies is still alive, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so.
Because I wonder if he'll be in because because you have the other guy that's in there as well too, who's been in the other films, and I
However,
think I
the other
did.
guy that's in there that's been in the other films is not alive, and they actually
Yeah,
have someone doing his voice.
yeah, because I think I mentioned like when we were talking about Indiana Jones, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that this is going to take place before Last Crusade.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, you did.
and
You
like,
did
because I mean,
mention that.
kind of have you kind of have to go around that age thing to make the Indiana Jones games and stuff, because you don't want to make them too old. You don't want to all of a sudden like have it take place after Last Crusade, and then you're wondering what happened to Sean Connery. Like,
Yeah.
there's placing it in between those films is great. But no, it looks really good. Like, I think the name could have been dressed up a little bit.
Yeah, I think,
You know,
you know, to me though, at the end of the day, the name has Indiana Jones in it, and that's all it really needs. Like, they could have called
yeah,
it.
and it won't be on this. It won't be on this Great Circle. So it won't be there. They could have called it like, the Great B button.
The Great B. The Great
The Great
B.
B button,
Oh, wow.
I think is what they could have called it.
But what I will say is, this also seemed like very much the type of game that Xbox gamers want and are missing, right? In the sense of
Yeah, like
it's a
the
cinematic action
controversy of
adventure.
stuff notwithstanding, but yeah.
It's just, yeah, I genuinely like, this has gone from a game that I wasn't sure I was going to be interested in to a game that I'm most likely playing day one, because I was very impressed. And knowing what this team did with the Wolfenstein games, like, I think they're going to knock this out the park, because they're basically just doing the same thing again, but with Indiana Jones, right? And that's I mean that in the most positive way possible, because, in one of the Wolfenstein games they put me in a wheelchair with guns, and that was it. Like, they did so, so it's, I'm very, very pleased to see.
I still think about that twist. What was it, in New Order or World Colossus? And like I even have like I got the collector's edition for that, and it comes with like the doll.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you can actually, can you see it? Is it there? No, no, it's in my bedroom. Um, but yeah, like that whole thing with BJ Blazkowicz, like that twist, I still think about
Yeah,
to that
yeah.
day,
And
because
that's the
like you
thing.
see that moment happen.
I think that a lot of people, when they think about machine games, because they are a lesser known studio, that's the way I would describe it. In terms of, many gamers don't even know who Machine Games are, so they are a lesser
Yeah, they know
known
the
studio.
time, they just don't know of the developer. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I would say is, but when people do think about them, they're often applauded for first person shooting combat as being their kind of thing that they're really, really good at, right? And I think they don't get
Yeah.
enough credit for actually being a studio that has told very good stories, like, and does cinematics very, very well, and makes things feel like, yeah, like, in this indie trailer, there's a bit where he jumps from one plane to another plane. That felt like a set piece if I've ever seen one in my life. And what I think is really clever about this is that the first person perspective sets it apart from Uncharted and Tomb Raider. So those comparisons will still be there, but not in exactly the same way, right?
And the one thing I'll stress as well too is I think this game is going to sell extremely well on Steam.
Yes.
I think it's going to do well on Xbox. I think it's going to sell extremely well on Steam because people are going to mod in a third person camera.
Yeah, they will.
I guarantee it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like it looks fantastic. Like, I think Troy Baker does a very good job at what he's doing. Like, I want to see more than just a 4-second clip of him talking. I want to see a conversation entirely. Um, before I can kind of really pass judgment on it, because like Troy Baker is talented. Like, the one joke I think they made, I think it was on Giant Bomb, and they're saying like, for all the fear of like AI taking over voice actor jobs, the bigger threat is Troy Baker because he's in everything.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So
But
as we kind of close out our main topic of the show, I want to ask you something, Jeff. Now that we've seen
sure,
this developer direct, firstly, the first question is, how would you grade this show if you were to give it a grade?
it was really good. Like the mana surprise thing was it was interesting to see like some type of like advertising contract with Square Enix, which has been kind of Sony's little touchstone for a little while, which was
Yes.
interesting to see. Especially with Microsoft putting it in their show, making it a kind of a big sound the alarm for putting Japanese games on Xbox and all that kind of stuff. So that was important. Um, again, or a History Untold. I'll probably try it because it'll likely be on Game Pass. So like I'll give it a shot, but
Yeah.
probably only when it hits consoles. I won't touch it on PC. No, it was good. Indiana Jones, Hellblade, Avowed. Like I think honestly, it's an A showing for sure.
Yeah.
Like it's
I agree.
they did a lot to show off the games, to show the
And
teams
and
making
I
it,
think
and
as
passion
well,
behind all
what
of it.
like for me, look, would I have liked at least one more concrete date outside of the Hellblade date? Yes. But what I would say is when I look at Xbox as a whole for this year now, from first party, they have 6 games confirmed for this year. So even if one or two of those games slip, they still will have a decent amount of games just from first party. And I think that they're keeping their variety while seemingly making very high quality games as well. Like, Indie looks like a really high quality game. Hellblade 2 looks like a really high quality game. Avowed looks like it's going to be another great Western RPG for people that like that style of game. Like, I'm I do wonder, and I get why they announced Indie being there ahead of time, but there's part of me that wonders why they didn't leave Indie as the surprise. Like, why not have Indie be the surprise thing? Because nobody would have
I think mainly 'cause
expected it to
they
be there.
probably wanted it. They probably wanted initial numbers.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. That makes sense, actually. It's just, because, the thing is, once it came out that Indie was going to be there, then it came out that it's like, oh, Indie's now slated for this year, and it's like, but how cool of a surprise would that have been? Of not only is Indie at this show when we wouldn't have expected it to be, but it's also meant to be coming this year when most people wouldn't have expected it either, Um, but I'm very very happy. I agree with you. I think this is a show. I do think now 3 of these in, because I do include the Starfield one as well. I think that Xbox have set a new quality standard for how these smaller showcases should be presented and how they should be put across, because
Yeah, because I don't think you need a host. I don't think you need to spend the money and
no.
and get a host. I
And I
don't
think
think there's a
also
need
the
for
other
that.
thing is,
If they do a deep dive interview thing, then sure.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And also I think the other thing is, each time they've set the expectation absolutely perfectly, right? And yes, okay, on the first one, Hi-Fi Rush was a really nice surprise as a shadow drop and as a game that we didn't expect to be there. And they've kind of now, and I know that Visions of Mana showing up was a surprise. It wasn't the same level of surprise, but it was still a surprise. I think they've now kind of set the expectation that every year, at the start of the year, or when you do one of these shows, we're probably going to hear from 3 or 4 games, and then there might be one smaller surprise here and there. I think that's kind of okay. I'm glad that they didn't do another shadow drop, just because I think that would have, as we said before, I think it would have set an unprecedented kind of expectation for them to try and reach. and they just didn't really need that. I am really intrigued to see what their summer showcase is now, because
Yeah.
obviously we still haven't heard anything from ABK yet, which we didn't expect to hear in this show. Like they said that nothing from ABK was going to be in this show. Um, but I think it's going to be a very good year for Xbox, and I think it's going to be a very good year. I think it's going to be an even better year for Game Pass subscribers, right? Because we've got the
Mm.
Persona 3 remake coming in just a couple of weeks' time now. We've got, four, I would imagine at least four first party games, and actually probably more than that, because you're going to have a Call of Duty later this year, which we don't even know anything about yet, other than maybe the name and the setting. Like, it's
Yeah.
they're about to have one of the strongest years in their history, and if they actually deliver all six of these games plus some other ABK stuff as well, I think they're going to blow people away, because all of this stuff looked great, if you ask me. And I like that they're retaining, most of all, I like that they're retaining the kind of identity of these studios and the variety, right? Like, they could have quite easily said to Ninja Theory, yeah, you can make a Hellblade 2, but we want it to be a 30 to 40 hour game. And we want it to
Yeah.
be this kind of. We want it to be our God of War. They could have said that. They could have said that to them. But it seems like they just sort of went, yeah, okay, make what you want. And we trust you to do it the best that you can do it. We're going to give you more resources to make it better than it ever was. Go and do it, right? So I think people should be really happy. I think people should be really excited. Um, and yeah, I'm excited to see what, like, some more of these games. I think we will see obviously more indie. I think we'll see more Avowed. I think those are two games that we're most likely to see in the summer showcase. Um, because I expect that we will get a release date for at least Avowed in that summer showcase. And then if indie definitely is making this year, we'll probably get a release date for that in that showcase as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, I'm pretty
And
happy.
we'll get it older.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Um, Now, before we kind of close out this episode, I've got about 15 minutes left here. Should we talk about what we've been playing recently? Because I know, as you mentioned earlier, we have both been playing a lot of things we can't talk about yet. So we apologise for that.
Yeah, like um I'm gonna try and get the review out for Turnip Boy Robs a Bank today. Um if you've played Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion, this one's a bit different. This one isn't like a Zelda like. This one's more of a roguelike in regards to robbing a bank, and you keep going into the bank and robbing it, getting more money, interacting with characters and stuff like that. So I'll have the review out for that. Hopefully today. That's the plan anyway. But
Could I
I
just
think the only
break
game that
some news to you, please?
sure.
I've just seen on Twitter that Power World, which is out today at time of recording, has sold
Yep,
over
I
a
missed it.
million copies in 8 hours, which is super impressive. And it's also reached the top 25 all time for highest concurrent players on Steam already. So that game seems like it's going to be a big success. And it is on Game Pass as well, so go and try it out if you feel like doing that. Pokemon with guns, what more could you want?
Yeah, I've played a little bit. I played a little bit this morning so far. I've just basically built a stick and fire and captured my first pal creature. So yeah, I'll be playing more of that today. But the game that I have been sinking the most amount of time in over the last week has been Warhammer 40K Darktide. I put a review out for this, back when it came out. But I've been playing an absolute ton with my roommate and got her hooked on it as well too. This game is just so much fun. They've improved a lot of it. The performance issues are kind of gone now. They've this is yeah, if you played it back when it launched on PC, this has been kind of almost overhauled with they added skill trees and a whole bunch of stuff. They added a new mission where you fight like two bosses at the end. We finally beat that the other day. I've been working through as a psyker this time around as opposed to a zealot. This game is just like it is. I think it is the best of the like Left 4 Dead style games, and I will say I like it better than Left 4 Dead. The
Interesting.
Warhammer universe is gorgeous. It's this like Gothic cathedral architecture in a lot of its areas. Like, when you played with us, unfortunately, we
Yes,
got the same level twice in a row.
we did. I
Um,
am looking forward to
but
playing more though because it was super
it's
fun,
so fun.
and also I love the presentation, like in the cinematic cutscenes. Is great. It's great, and it is
Yeah.
just good.
I mean,
It's what I love about the game as well is it's something I could easily see myself playing as let's jump into a level or two and then kind of jump off and jump in again. It's an easy jump in and jump out kind of
yeah.
game. These levels don't take too long. They're probably about 20 minutes each. So it's very
Yeah.
bite size. But
Depending on
it
the difficulty, because like, we were playing on like the base difficulty,
mhm,
and when you start getting into like Malice, it's literally like four times as many enemies, and like sometimes you'll get like two elite enemies at once. Like
yeah.
it's really it's really fantastic. Like the energy that goes into each of its missions is just pure chaos. Um, and the classes are different enough. I know like a lot of people have said there's basically just two classes and that's human or Ogryn, but you do get like the Zealot, the Psyker, the Ogryn, and then you were
The
the
veteran.
Veteran. I'm hoping that they add like an ad tech or something like that where you can put down turrets or like
Mhm.
that type of thing. I think that'd be kind of neat because there's a lot of really cool stuff within Warhammer. I mean, obviously they're not going to add a Space Marine because it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to the story. You've also got Space Marine 2 coming out. Um, but yeah, like the Warhammer franchise has transferred itself to video games extremely well, especially the 40K stuff. Like I definitely want to buy Vermintide 2 because I'd only played it through Game Pass. So I want to try and find that cheap to go through because Vermintide 2
Nice.
was very fun.
Nice. I
It's
didn't
basically
play
this.
Vermintide 2, but I've
It's
enjoyed
it's
Darktide.
basically like because there's two Warhammer. There's Warhammer and then there's Warhammer 40K. Vermintide is Warhammer, so it's fantasy stuff. So it's like orcs and goblins and that kind of stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Um, bows and arrows and shields and swords and stuff. But this one here, like, yeah, like it's really interesting because like you get your character, you have your melee, you have your ranged, and then you can upgrade those as well. You can change the perks on them. You can sacrifice weapons for blessings, and then take those blessings and put them on the same types of weapons. And then kind of min max your characters there. There's tons of builds that you can go through. There's the ability of actually creating builds through your skill trees. It allows you to unlock different uh, um, layouts for how you want. So if you go, okay, I want to do this mission as my fire version of this. I'm going to do this as my ice version of this. Like you can change that and play around with those. So you're not stuck to one build. You can kind of reset your stuff at any time. Missions, yeah, they're about 20 to 25 minutes long. There's I think five difficulties. Um, but and then there's different tiers within those for difficulties because you get high intensity and low intensity. High intensity is batshit fucking crazy. Um, like you just get swarmed by stuff. There's tons of loot. You make your characters look really cool. I think the costs for the real money stuff is a bit expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it is it is such a good game. It runs really well now on Series X console. Um, and it's still available on Game Pass. It's definitely a game that when it's going to leave Game Pass, I will hands down buy it.
Nice,
Um,
nice.
it is such a good time. Like if you're looking for something to jump in with and play with friends, get Dark Tide. It is unbelievably fun. Um, yeah, it is just great. The co-op works fantastic as well. And it's just
Yes.
the presentation. Like again, like the cutscenes look awesome and they're great. The cutscenes are essentially like, "Hey, you're useless. Don't forget it." Or like the next time you'd be like, "Hey, you did a good job, but you're still useless." Like that's every single cutscene.
So
Um,
yeah, I agree with you. Like I do, I really like it. However, there is something else that I have played that I can talk about because it's an old game,
don't
but
break embargo. Don't do it.
I um
Yeah, I know.
I had some time. I had some time to finish something over the last couple of weeks, and that was Spider-Man 2. And
Hey, there you go.
this was a game that, I'll be honest, until about halfway through this game, I wasn't loving it. I didn't hate it, but I felt like, to me, the changes they had made to the combat made it less interesting to me, and it felt like they moved away from the Arkham style of gameplay, and it felt almost too ability based and reminded me somewhat of Avengers. And it's not as bad as Avengers.
Yeah, I can kind of see that where it is available. Like combat feels like you are in in a constant state of waiting for your cooldowns.
Yes.
Like you feel like you're panicking a lot there.
Yeah.
Um,
And so I didn't enjoy, until a certain moment in the game, I did not enjoy combat anywhere near as much as, let's say, Spider Man 2018. Another thing that I thought was lesser than Spider Man 2018 as well, but I can understand why they made the change, is that they've taken all of Peter's gadgets away, right? So you can't stealth in the same way that you could in 2018 because you can't set your little trip mines, you can't do your other little things, and some of the gadgets remain in the game in different.
I think I think a lot of them were removed because they probably looked at the percentage of the amount of times that people were actually using it based off data. Because I think like applying that like web line anywhere
Yeah.
and then creeping over that, I think that created a lot of stealth
So I
in
do. So
different
yeah,
ways.
and that's where I would say it balanced it out to some extent because you had the
Yeah,
ability to do the web lines, which I really liked. However, I just feel like, to me, I'm one of these people that if you've given me the option to do something in the past, when you take away that option without adding a replacement that is the same in terms of its depth of use, then to me that is a negative change because you've
Jordan, they
almost.
only had 300 million in this game. You got to cut them some slack. They only had 300 million.
um so
Yeah, no, I get it.
so that annoyed me as well because I felt like I had less options in stealth than I previously had, and it felt like they were pushing you towards combat because they wanted you to use these abilities and things. But for the majority of the game, I wasn't enjoying that combat, right? And then obviously, spoilers for Spider Man 2 for those who haven't played it yet, but you start to get the Venom abilities, and those immediately improve the gameplay
I mean,
experience.
they showed that in the first gameplay trailer
Yeah.
of Spider-Man fighting in the black suit, so it's not really a
However, not
spoiler too
however,
much.
not everybody watches trailers, so I was just trying to be nice. Um,
It's on the box art, Jordan.
but yeah,
Yeah, I get it. I get it though. Yeah.
but you get
But
those abilities, and I would say that they infinitely feel better than any other abilities in the game, in my opinion, to use. Um, they feel much more kind of multi useful, and you can chain them together in really good ways as well. And then you actually get the anti venom abilities later in the game, which I won't explain how you get those, but you get those, and they are basically kind of slightly tweaked versions of the venom
yeah.
abilities. And
What did you
they're really
what did
good
you
as well.
What did you think of the going to the fair, the Coney Island stuff?
I liked that. I personally liked that. I don't know what you thought of it, but that entire section I enjoyed personally.
To me, it was way too long. Um,
Interesting.
like
Interesting.
for me, it's like a lot of the game felt padded, and a lot of the Peter Parker moments. I
Hmm.
felt that those moments, like, I don't think they hit as high. Like the stuff with Harry Osborn, obviously you have to have that stuff in there to build that
Yeah.
relationship. But the Coney Island stuff for me just felt like we need a way to show off Harry with, like, what he's got going on. And that was fine, but like, raise your controller to put your hands up.
Yeah, that was
That
yeah,
was so
that was weird.
dumb.
That was
Like
weird.
that stuff was just stupid.
What I will
Um,
say
and I
is
think the guy who played Mysterio was also the guy that was in Star Wars Jedi Survivor 2 who
he
played your
was
sidekick.
he was he was. Um, I what I will say is that I think the Peter side of the story felt very rushed and very secondary for most of the game. Um,
The Miles stuff is great.
the Miles stuff is great. I actually didn't like the Miles stuff early on, and that is because I found him to be quite a whiny character early in the game. And to me, where his character was mentally near the start of the game just didn't really tally up with how his character grew during the Miles Morales game. Um,
Mhm.
to me, there was a bit of a kind of narrative disconnect there between those two games, and it just felt weird. However, the way that his part of the story evolves over time and kind of ends up, and his relationship with another character in the game and how that is used really really well, I thought was excellent. Like that, all of
I
that
was gonna
stuff.
make a joke, but it would have given it away. Um, yeah.
so
Well,
yeah, I'm
what did you
vet.
think of
Go on. What do I think of?
what did you think of Craven?
I thought Craven was the best character in the game. I'll be honest.
Yeah, his stuff was really good. I like how they tied in even like the chameleon and kind of his kind of attachment to
Yeah.
that, even though like they kind of use that in like one moment, but
Yes. Yeah.
um I
I
think
would
one of
love to
the
see. So I would love to see, and I won't spoil anything here, but I'd love to see a Craven game. Like,
I don't think there's enough material for a whole game.
you don't think so? You don't think that you could
No.
base it on before the events of this game?
And have him what? Hunt tigers?
True. True.
I I I don't think there's enough really there to kind of warrant that. I think if they're going to do DLC, I think you pay off the Spider Cop mission
Mhm.
where that ends.
Yes. Yeah.
Because like that was something that I actually didn't even see coming. And when you think back on that mission, you're like, well, of course it's that.
Yeah.
This is called this, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, that was the one of the best quests in the game
Yeah. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
how that event. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm wondering how
What I
they're gonna
will say,
do that.
and this is one area where I am also slightly negative on the game. I think this game, and it might be because it's the third one, but for me, it does fall into the traps that a lot of open world games fall into, where it's like there's a little bit too much filler. There are there's a little bit.
It's way better than the first one, though.
It is. It
Like I'll give
is.
it that.
It is.
But yeah, no,
But
I
and
get
there
you there, and I still
and there's a
yeah,
lot of the other thing as well is there's a lot of repeated activities, and some of the activities that are in this game are almost activities from the first game, just with a different skin on them. So I'll give you an
yeah.
example. There's an activity in this game where you're basically chasing after these drones, right? And yes, you're using the web wings, so it's a little bit different. But that effectively, to me, felt like exactly the same as chasing pigeons in Spider-Man 2018. Like,
Yeah, and like I don't like the activity where you have to fly that little bee drone.
oh
I'm
my
like,
god.
and then like the bike with the battery. It's like, fuck off. I want to do Spider-Man stuff. Like
Yeah,
I understand you need Peter to kind of balance that stuff out, but
yeah,
those were just not fun at all.
yeah. Do you know some of the stuff that I did really like in the game, but I actually felt almost didn't go long enough? It was the lizard stuff.
Yeah,
Like, I really liked that stuff. I liked exploring that character because that's one thing I'll give them credit for in this kind of universe they've created, is that they've left enough kind of open to the imagination, right? Because they could, they're in a position where they could actually do a prequel to Spider-Man 2018 with a younger Peter Parker if they wanted to, because they've left.
yeah, and even, yeah, and they've left. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, they've left so many of his early adventures and battles with these characters to be explored, right?
Yeah. And like it's good, like yeah, I can see where they're going with like the future and stuff, and I won't spoil that. But I mean like even in this game and stuff like that, like slight spoilers, it's the game's been out for a little while. It's like they kill off a few Spider-Man villains in the background with Craven kind of going nuts across New York City. I mean, you even like it'll be interesting to see kind of with how they go, and I mean, they are obviously setting up for like the next one.
Yeah.
Like there's a post-credit scene for sure. But the last thing that I'll say on Spider-Man 2 is I still think New York is fucking boring.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
better than what it was in the first one, but
Yeah.
like Miles Morales' New York during winter and Christmas and stuff, it just added so much personality to that city. Um, that I just kind of wish that like they would they need to dress up New York in a bit more than just putting sand in one particular neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
It's like I still think New York is so boring to explore in a video game because we've done it a billion times.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. I liked it though. Having finished the game, overall, I did really like it. I'm glad I went back to it and finished it. Um, because I almost didn't, and then yeah, I actually finished it the day before I got something that I'm not allowed to speak about yet. So it was kind of perfect timing as well because it just filled this
I
lovely
keep
gap.
I keep checking my inbox for my like through this podcast. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I got news for this game, news for this game and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I'm like, God damn it, just send me code. Um,
Um.
worst case scenario though, that is I will be buying it
Yes. Yeah.
if I need to because
Nice.
I'm
Nice.
super excited for it.
But yes, so we haven't played much, but in reality we have. It's just that we can't talk about it with you yet.
Yeah,
Um,
and I've played more Road Trader, so I mean, like, I'm going to be putting the review out for that
nice,
shortly.
nice. I did also. I'm planning to play. I bought the Last of Us Part Two PS5 version because
So sorry.
I specifically want the no return mode, just to see how that actually plays. Um, because I want to be able to compare it to God of War Valhalla, because I very much enjoyed God of War Valhalla. Something that I may or may not review yet. I'm not too sure. I'm possibly going to write a review for it, but writing reviews for DLCs is actually quite a hard thing to do. Um, it can be very difficult, and that's why sometimes we don't write those reviews. But
The
possibly,
easiest way
possibly
that
I'll
I've
get one.
found to write reviews for DLC is to treat it as an extension to a review that you may or may not have already written. So
Yes.
you aren't diving back into the combat or anything like that other than what it serves within the DLC.
Yeah,
So it's don't treat the DLC as a review of the whole game plus the DLC. So that's one thing that's a little bit easier.
I
Like
agree.
if
I
you
agree.
check out the the review that I did for Pale Reach for Dredge,
Nice.
um, I basically talk about what that DLC offers to the game,
Yeah.
that you already, because
Yeah.
like if people are checking a review on the DLC,
Yeah.
they've already played the base game, so they already know that information.
What I would say is that I've noticed, and this is just a very quick in case I don't write a review. I've noticed that not many people have played God of War Valhalla. And what I would say is that if you're someone who cares about the story of these God of War games, God of War Valhalla isn't just DLC. It is something that is crucial to the story, and it has big elements of character development in the game. Um,
Yeah, it'll set up Kratos's next kind of adventure.
So
Like
I
it's a lot
really
more than
would
the end game.
recommend, given that it's a free expansion, a free new mode to the game, I really would recommend either watching someone play it through if you struggle with roguelikes yourself, or just trying to play it through. Like, you can put it on easy. It's, it doesn't take too long to get through. I think it took me about 6 hours to kind of finish enough runs to see all of the story. Um, and there is significant story and character development in this mode. So I really would, if you're into the story in that universe, it isn't something you can miss. And I think that that's why it's free. Like, I think they made it free knowing that it's like, we want people to play this because it's actually something that is crucial to our story, and it's not just additive. It feels like it's setting up the future of Kratos as a character and where the franchise itself is going to go because of that. So definitely check it out. And like I said, you may or may not get a more fully detailed review from me in the next week or so. So make sure you're keeping an eye on the website as well, because I'm sure that Jeff will have several reviews for you if you don't get one from me. Um, and for now, I think that's all we have. We should be back next week. Once again, we don't know what the topic is. We make no promises of anything because I've been told that I'm never allowed to promise an episode. um,
Oh, I even commented about it on the website for like the episode titles. We talked about the curse of Jordan announcing dates.
Nice, nice. Um, and I hope you've enjoyed the slightly updated intro as well, which you will see on this episode with our brand new logo, which is up
Hey,
above our heads. Um,
nice.
let us know what you think of the logo actually, because Jeff made this one a couple of weeks ago. We just wanted to rebrand slightly. We hope you like it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. There's our personal Twitters just below us, and then we also have the podcast Twitter down in the description. We have a website Twitter as well. Yes, we have a lot of Twitter profiles, but it's kind of needed with everything that we're doing. And we hope you have enjoyed this episode. Let us know what you thought of the Xbox Developer Direct. Which one of those games, now that you've seen them, are you most looking forward to? And yeah, we will see you next time. But for now, it's a goodbye from me.